Hello. Guess who's back? Okay, actually, he's quite, I don't know. I have very strong feelings about that human, so, Hey y'all, welcome back to Bookish Realm. I forgot my entire intro just now. Yo, I feel kind of like rusty at this. I literally have not been in front of a camera in like a couple of weeks because I needed just a miniature break, and I took my miniature break. And also, we're back with another weekly wrap up. This is technically, I think, 6 and 7. Let's just go on YouTube because I'm not going to sit on here and embarrass myself and get the numbers wrong because I don't remember like what I've done at all because I'm just a strange human to not remember. Okay, so the last time I did this was week 6. Now week 7, I had a lot going on week 7, and so I didn't really read as much for week 7, but I did catch up on some stuff for week 8. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that were accomplished between 7 and 8, week 7 and 8. And yeah, we're just going to go with it. I didn't, to be honest with y'all, there was no point in me doing a week 7 because honestly, I didn't have anything to give you. I'm not going to lie to you. It probably would have been like a 5, 6, which I could have done it, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't have the capacity to do it, and so I wasn't gonna force myself. So if you're new here, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is the first video you're ever seeing from me, you're like, girl, what the hell are you talking about? Okay, so I do weekly wrap-ups on this channel because I read a lot. If you've already, you know this, there's timestamps down below. Skip to the content that you're interested in. But if you did not know, I do weekly wrap-ups because I read a lot. And so because I read a lot, it's easier for me to break all the information up into these chunks instead of doing a mid-month or full month wrap up. Right now, as of the date that I am filming this, which is in February, towards the end of February, right before this video goes up, because we love a good procrastination, I am probably at a little over 130 books read for the year. With that amount of content, because I do read a lot of children's literature, we don't disregard, shame, or look down upon children's literature on this channel. The number inflates itself, and it's a lot of content to talk about, so I do break it up. However, 2 caveats to that. I do not talk about the picture books that I've read on this channel, well, in these weekly wrap-ups. I was going to do a monthly picture book log, but instead of doing it every single month, I think I'm going to combine a few months. So I may do a quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. It just is going to work out better that way. I think that content wise, that's what I'm going to prefer. So just a heads up for you who are waiting for the picture book log. You may not get that until the end of March because I think I'm going to do quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Don't ask. It's just something mentally that I decided was going to be best for me. So I do list the picture books that I've read. And then for the comics and graphic novels and manga, I do not specifically talk about them here. I am going to be talking about those on my Realm of Comics channel where I discuss everything graphic novels, manga, and comics related. So if you're not following that channel and you want to know more specifics about it, because I read a lot in the past couple of weeks, you're going to want to go over to that channel. I should have that content going up sometime this weekend. All right, so let's get into the picture books that I ended up reading. I'm trying to remember the last thing that I would have shown you, which probably would have been too much. So since then, I have read a few more picture books. Unfortunately, I do not have copies of them anymore, but I will go ahead and insert pictures here. I read The Last Stand, so good. When You Have to Wait, The Blue Pickup, Politeness, I Am a Masterpiece, Imagine You and Me, very, very cute as well. And then I also read Why We Dance. So not a lot of picture book content necessarily, but I have a huge stack over there that I need to make it through after I get finished filming this video. Graphic novels, comics, and manga. I read a good bit, which included Lunch Buddies, Saga Volume 10, Saga Volume 11, which Something's Wrong with Us Volume 13, Something's Wrong with Us Volume 14, Clark and Lex, and then also Shazam Thundercrack, which huge disappointment. Huge disappointment. All right, so now that we got those 2 sections out the way, we're going to go ahead and jump into the books that I read. Now, these are not going to be in specific order, because guess who's still not caught up on the reviews? I have been reviewing some stuff as I go, but for some of this content, I just have not had the opportunity to sit down and write my review the way I'm supposed to. So please forgive me, but we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books to talk about. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to be talking about is My Fair Brady by Brian D. Kennedy. This is one that I was finishing up when I did my last weekly wrap up. This is a YA rom-com that literally, I mean, in the description, it is comped as My Fair Lady meets She's All That. And honestly, that comp, for once, I feel like the comp literally fits the description of the book. Like, that's exactly what this book is. This is a love letter to theater kids. It is fun, it is romantic, it is heart-wrenching, it is about self-awareness, it is about appreciating those that you have in your life. There's so many different components of this. So it follows two main characters, Wade and Elijah. Elijah is a theater kid, used to being the center of attention. At the beginning of this book, he is single. He had recently gone through a breakup. There's a lot of reasons why he had gone through the breakup with his previous partner, Reese. And he is in his senior year and he wants to get a lead position or lead role, not position. He wants to get a lead role in the school's adaptation of My Fair Lady. I'm not going to say how that goes because I do think that that kind of, you know, maybe spoils it a little bit, but basically we are looking at it from his perspective and then we're looking at it from Elijah's perspective. Now Elijah is kind of like the opposite of Wade, where Wade, excuse me, is like very out there, very, I guess you would say, extroverted and is well known and is popular. Elijah pretty much like keeps to himself. He's overlooked. Not that many people like engage with him, and the two of them end up having a run-in backstage, and so they end up making this deal. So Elijah's like, hey, you know, you're a popular kid, you know, what can you do to make me more popular? And if you do that, I can teach you like basically how not to be an asshole all the time so that you can win back Reese as your partner. And of course, naturally, as things go, their relationship ends up developing from like complete, they're not adversaries, I won't even say that, they just don't interact with each other at school, to becoming friends, to becoming something more. I really, like, this was so close to being a very perfect book for me. I think in some aspects, the pacing didn't always work for me. I felt like some places it was like very energetic. I felt very engaged in the story. In some parts I felt like it was a little slower, but y'all, the writing was good, the character development was good. I think that if you're looking at this from the perspective of an adult, you have to be very careful on how you view Wade, because Wade, I think, is very much so what we would see in some teenagers. The lack of self-awareness, the, you know, it's all about me, and Wade actually, in my opinion, does play the victim role a lot, which is something that I typically don't like in an individual, but at his age, I could definitely understand like where he's coming from. He just struggles with, I think, anything that you would see an average teenager deal with. And so sometimes he can be a bit much, but I think that that's what Kennedy was trying to illustrate to the reader, is that he has this big personality where he doesn't really think about anybody but himself. And through meeting Elijah and interacting with him, he starts to build more self-awareness. And he's not perfect, and I'm not saying that by the end of the book he's a perfect character, but he starts to realize like, hey, you know, I think in a lot of situations I put myself first and don't really consider how everyone else is going to feel about the situation. I think with Elijah is such a sweetheart. And he builds so much confidence over the course of this book, from someone who doesn't really feel like acknowledged or seen, and has parents that are really supportive. I love that too, where we have characters who their family members are supportive of them and anything and everything that they want to do. And Elijah definitely comes from a family that's super supportive, sometimes a little overbearing, but he's very shy, very like much so into, you know, just being by himself. He's very much so like a recluse, and he has a lot to learn about balancing like all of these new friendships that he makes and which ones really matter to him, and, you know, trying to think about and really analyze these feelings that he may or may not have for Wade, the same way that Wade has to analyze these feelings he may or may not have for Elijah. This was so cute. I think that if you like theater, or if you did theater in high school, you will really, really appreciate the energy and life that Kennedy was able to capture in this book. It was definitely well written. I know that Kennedy's, I think his first book was a little bit country, which came out, I don't think last year, but maybe the year before. It's either 2022 or 2023. I can't remember. I definitely want to go back and read that one, because just the brightness, the tone of this work, I think he just has an authorial tone that's very bright, very fun, very playful, and can get serious when it needs to be a serious situation, but it's one of those YA rom-coms that pulls you in and you're very, very intrigued with it. So definitely enjoyed this one. 4.5 stars for me. All right, so the next one that I ended up reading was one I really, really did end up enjoying, and that is Heroes by Alan Gratz. I don't know why I got stuck on that. It's Heroes by Alan Gratz. If you know anything about Alan Gratz, he is very well known for writing middle grade and YA historical fiction from so many different parts of history. And this one specifically is a World War II book. But what makes it different than any other World War II book that I've encountered, and I know that some people have said similar things, is that this one really illustrates how the U.S. was brought into World War II with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So the book itself follows two friends, Frank and Stanley. And Stanley, just to note, because it is a big part of this book, is Japanese American. And of course, the events of the book follow what happens before, during, and after the attack of Pearl Harbor. And they are literally having a typical day. The things that they would do on an average day as friends. And I like that at the beginning of this book, there is some sort of conflict that happens between Frank and Stanley, because of the fact that Frank has severe anxiety. And I won't say what it stems from, because that is part of Frank's story to kind of reveal that aspect of his life to Stanley. And it has to do with what happened previously to him prior to moving to Hawaii. And Stanley and Frank end up in this conflict because of a situation that's bullying, which I should say that this book has content warnings. I mean, it's war, so you're going to see violence. There's death. There's quite, I wouldn't say like super graphic, but there are graphic depictions of the after effects of war. There is mentions of death, of people dying, anxiety. Frank suffers from severe anxiety, so there is anxiety representation in this one. And when I say that Frank has severe anxiety, he does. The way that he moves, and not just like physically, but mentally and emotionally, is very calculated. It's like a risk assessment for everything that he does. And that really does impact his relationship with Stanley. And while they're kind of sort of having this conflict, what ends up happening is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And that conflict, I think, really is reflected in how Frank and Stanley both react to the bombing and the different decisions that they have to make in order to save people that have been impacted by the bombing. And a lot of it also has to do with how people begin to perceive Stanley, because he is Japanese American, and how people begin to look at his family, and what Frank starts to realize about the community around him in respect to his best friend being Japanese American. I do like that Alan Gratz does give a content warning at the very beginning of the book, saying that because the book takes place in the 1940s, there is a use of language that is historically tied to this time period that is considered offensive and derogatory to this day. And it does provide, I think, similarities to how people often mimic history. I think about the way that Pearl Harbor happens, think about Japanese Americans, and then quite often, you know, in U.S. history, we're not taught anything about Japanese internment camps that happened as a direct result of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But this mass fear of a group of people based off of a singular event, and it's interesting because we think about the treatment of Japanese Americans, and then instantaneously in reading this book, like in the midst of me being in the middle of this book, I thought about how so many Asian Americans were treated at the beginning of the pandemic. As soon as word got out that COVID-19 originated in China, the anti-Asian sentiment rippled throughout the US. It's very similar to kind of the rhetoric and the dynamic in communities that you see in this book. And I think that Alan Gratz did that intentionally because of the timing of this book when it's releasing. And he's creating parallels. Whether he explicitly states that information in the book or not, I think that he was so brilliant in crafting that parallel, and how people will so quickly change their opinions on a whole group of people based off of a singular event. Even if the people who are present that you've known for a very long time, that you've worked with, that are a part of your community, you instantaneously turn on them because someone of the same background as them has committed an atrocity. And I think that I'm telling you, if I know anything about Alan Gratz and the way that he writes his books, he's very intentional about how he creates a storyline. This definitely, I would say, is a good middle grade recommendation for any young reader that A, loves history, B, loves the development of friendships, conversations about courage and strength and honor, and loves fast-paced books. This is not a long book, but when I tell you it moves because once again, this is why I love Alan Gratz, because I think everything that he does is so intentional, because that book had a pacing and a tone to it that it almost felt staccato. That's why I snapped my fingers like that. Play piano. So I think this one thing is like, it's very like staccato rhythm to it, where Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor was not a long attack. In terms of, yes, I mean, we're talking, I think it was in between 1 to 2 hours is the actual time frame in which the attack took place. But I don't think we realize when we're thinking about it, like, oh, the attack on Pearl Harbor, thinking, you know, you think a full day or of course, across a series of days. But in actuality, it was a relatively short period of time. And so it happened so quickly, so much damage and so many lives were lost so quickly. And so in that same cadence, he moves the novel very, very quickly. It's literally scene after scene, event after event, action moment after action moment. And of course, he takes some liberties with how he describes how certain things happen, that there's some ways in which like the boys find themselves in places that literally there's no way that could have even possibly happened because of the timing of things. But he just wanted to kind of give a broad view of what happened. And he does mention that at the end of the book in his author notes. I also love that we have two main characters that are very much so into comics. They bring up some very like golden age comic references that were just icing on the cake, and there's a tidbit at the end that I won't spoil for you that I thought was really, really great. I just love watching the two of them, and I love seeing, I think, Frank evolve into a different person. Not like a completely different person, but how much he learned in such a short period of time, because his hand was forced in a lot of situations and he had to act in order to be able to save people. So I love this. I mean, 5 stars. It's Alan Gratz. You can't go wrong with him. Okay, so the next book that I have, y'all, is another 5-star read. I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all right now, I do not recommend this book lightly. It is a middle grade book. However, in the same regard, it's not easy content, and it's one that honestly I struggled through, but it was a 5-star read. You'll see what I'm saying when I talk about it. Okay, so that book is Shark Teeth by Sherry Winston. I read a Sherry Winston book last year. Don't ask me to remember the title. I know it's something After Revolution. And that one was okay. I think I gave that one like 3.5 stars. But Shark Teeth is a different ballgame. It's a completely different ballgame. Content warning for this book. There are lots. I wish I would have written them down, but I'm going to tell you the ones that I remember off the top of my head. Parental abandonment, emotional abuse, mental abuse. I mean, we say parental abandonment, but child neglect, alcoholism. There's some verbal abuse that goes on in here. Bullying, lack of protection from foster parents was a huge one that I did not expect to walk into, but it definitely, I think, captures the realism of Kita's experience. And I'm sure that there are more, but those are the ones that I know, like, right directly off the top of my head without having them written down. So Shark Teeth follows a main character by the name of Kita. And at the start of this novel, Kita has just not too long, maybe like 80 plus days prior to this, she had been removed from her home, and she's just back in her home with her mother, her brother, and her sister, and she's the oldest. And Kita basically is the adult in the household. She takes care of the household finances, she watches her brother and her sister, and she has, I can't remember if there's an actual name for it, but she has a lot of teeth in her mouth, and she's called shark teeth. And I can't remember if it's the actual thing where it looks like you have extra teeth in your mouth because your adult teeth have come up before all of your baby teeth have fallen out. But that's a big thing. People bully her and tease her for it. Her mother is so awful. Her mother reminded me of everything I do not want to be as a parent, which I never will be, but just the way that she would talk to her daughter, the way she would call the younger sister basically more attractive than Kita, that or Kita wasn't as pretty as her younger sister. She would always take the opportunity to make jabs at Kita where she could. And it doesn't just stop there. So when Kita and her siblings are brought back into the household, she wants to give her mother a fair chance, because at this point she's lost the kids so many times that the state is pretty much like, this is your last chance. You're walking on thin ice, and it is slowly cracking under your feet because you do not take care of these kids the way you're supposed to. The last time, I think, prior to this situation, she lost the kids because her brother wasn't getting the treatment that he needed. And of course, Kita, not being a therapist or an adult or a social worker or a caretaker that has experience raising and caring for a child that has fetal alcohol syndrome, she's not in a place to take care of her disabled brother. And her mother left her at home, and he was upset about something that had happened, and things just completely went left. The police were called, and they got taken away. Kita believes that her mother is going to walk the right path. She's going to do the right things. Everything's going to be different. But her younger sister is pretty much like, she's not going to change. She's not going to be any different. Like, stop giving her chances. Stop giving her the opportunity to basically ruin our lives. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And Kita just keeps pushing through because she just thinks that her mother is going to make a 180. She's going to realize the error of her ways, and she's going to take care of these kids the way she's supposed to take care of these kids. Well, Kita gets introduced to this dance team, baton team, and she has this amazing new principal that ends up being the coach of the team, and she's looking for this opportunity to basically be the 12-year-old that she is. And of course, naturally, her mother is a piece of shit, and she will not let Kita have this opportunity. I get so angry thinking about this book because this book disturbed me in so many different ways because of the fact that I know that this is a situation that a lot of kids face, and there are parents out here who do this. And one of the best quotes from this book was that basically insinuating that just because someone can biologically like have children does not make them a parent. It doesn't mean that they automatically have the skill set to be a parent. And that is the epitome of Kita's mother. She is trash. She's horrible. And she broke that girl in so many, it broke my heart reading this book, y'all. This is probably one of the most disturbing middle grade books that I've read. but in a way where I think that Sherry Winston did a great job capturing the experience of kids who have adults in their household who behave in the way that Kita's mother behaves. Your child is supposed to be a child. As a parent, there's so many things that I want to do. I want to go out. Not really, but there's sometimes like things where people are like, oh, Ashley, come out. And I'm like, yeah, I can't. I have a kid. And I don't begrudge my child for that. It's not her responsibility. That's not her fault. I know that with having a child come certain sacrifices. I don't get to just go out whenever I feel like going out. I don't get to hang out and party or go to happy hour whenever I want to, because that's just not the place that I'm at in my life. My child needs me here. My child needs me paying attention to her, taking care of her. But also, that's me knowing how to be a parent, and we don't see that in Kita's mother. And it's so sad. I think what made this book so difficult to read is that Kita wants so badly to give her mother that grace, but the manipulation, the gaslighting, not only from the mother, but the grandmother. If your grandchild is just begging you, like, please, just so we don't get separated, so we don't, because, once you end up in the foster system and you have siblings, there's no guarantee that you and your siblings are going to get placed in the same household. And so she's begging her grandmother, please just take us so the three of us don't get separated. And, it's just kind of like the grandmother's like, no, I can't do that. And it's like you would rather see your grandchildren end up in the system, separated, and then they end up in the system, and then what? And then we see some pretty horrific things happen while they're in the system. And it's a lot, y'all. I'm not going to lie and say that this book is not a lot, because this book is a lot and it is heavy. But I think that Sherry Winston did a good job in painting a realistic, but also a very careful and I think very respectful and very sensitive perspective of what Kita was going through. I think that this is one that I definitely would say 10 and up in terms of recommendations because of the content. But it's a necessary book because it's easy to, I think, to think about things like this, but I think to read about it and to really sink in, even as a parent, to think like there are kids literally who are dealing with what Kita's dealing with or worse, to have to bounce from one foster home to the next with no guarantee of there being any safety in those households, not knowing what the relationship dynamics are going to be like for that child with other kids who are already in that household. It sucks. It sucks, but this book was so well written. It was so well written and done in such a realistic way and a respectful way, and in a way that's like, I'm not going to give you a perfect happy ending because that's not real for a lot of the kids who go through this. And so I'm going to give you a picture where there's still hope in the end of this book, but I'm not going to give you a book where everything is loosey-goosey at the end and everybody's happy, kumbaya, type of situation. Because I'm going to tell you right now, please don't go into that book thinking that it is. It is powerful. It is needed. 5 stars. One of my favorites of 2024 already. We're in February. All right, so the next one that I have is a adult. It's a contemporary romance. It's not a rom-com. It's more of a contemporary romance, and it's The Fairytale Life of Dorothy Gale by Virginia Cantra. This is a loose retelling of The Wizard of Oz, and this is about a main character by the name of Dorothy Gale, Dorothy D. Gale. She basically is trying to figure out her life after her mother takes her and her sister Tony globetrotting, and she's left to stay with her aunt and uncle, her Aunt M, of course. And she ends up getting caught up with this professor when she's at school, and she has, I think, all these ambitions and wishes, but through this relationship she kind of loses herself, and he takes the most intimate details of their relationship, puts them in a book and publishes the book, and gets critical acclaim acclaim for the book, and a lot of people end up knowing that it is her that he's based this book off of. And so he essentially humiliates her for clout and fame. And in order to get away from that, because she does want to be a writer, she does want to get her degree, she decides to go to Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. And there she meets a cast of characters that are very similar to the Lion, the Tin Men, and the Scarecrow, which I like the paralleling. Like it wasn't like super drastic retelling of the Wizard of Oz, but it gave little nods to the characters in the original work, and really developed their characteristics based off of the characteristics that you would have seen in the original work. This one for me, I'm not gonna lie to you, I always tell y'all, I always struggle with contemporary romances, because I think that there's some aspects of them that feel a little formulaic, and this is not particularly different in that way. I do like thematically what it was doing with the retelling. I also liked this slight conversation that we have about reclaiming your life and the impact of men abusing their power and taking advantage of young women and this type of, and people would say like, oh, well, she was a willing participant. You can be in a relationship and consent to things and then still be taken advantage of, especially when this man is more experienced, and he was looking for a rise in his own professional career and used her in order to do it, and destroyed her in order to do it. And I think that there were also some really good conversations about family dynamics and healing from family dynamics. And she has this kind of, I don't want to say it's like a gaping hole, but she has these questions about like her mother. And I think that she kind of pushes those insecurities onto her sister. And there's some really interesting moments between her and her sister kind of having to be like, you can take care of yourself and let me take care of me. You don't constantly have to worry about me or hold my hand or coach me through every situation. You have to also worry about finding your own happiness and getting your degree. There's like kind of like a love triangle, not really, but there's a potential for like two love interests, which wasn't a bad thing because I think it was very clear who she wanted to go with in the end. And I think that each one of these characters that represent like the Tin Men, the Lion, and the Scarecrow, they also have very interesting backstories in terms of like their love life, their family dynamics, how they've been impacted, what they want to do with their futures. And I like that we were able to see such robust character development for side characters. I think that was really important and a smart move on Cantra's part. I just found the pacing in this one to be slow. It was slow in some parts, and so because it was slow in some parts, I was just kind of like, there are moments when I wanted to pick it up and really read it, and there were other moments when I was like, I'm just not super engaged in this at all, and I would move on and do something else, which kind of is not a great thing when we're talking about interest level of a book. And I wasn't a huge fan of the writing style, which I think is what catered to the book feeling like it was kind of slow in some spaces. But overall, I think it was a solid read. I think it was an interesting retelling of The Wizard of Oz. I think it included some very interesting social commentary to it, with some unique characters that were a play on those old characters, like I said, but had personalities of their own. And so, like I said, solid read. I don't know if this author has written anything else, but overall, like I said, solid read. I get 3.5 stars. Okay, so the next one that I have is a younger middle grade fantasy-ish type of book, and it's Sejal. Correct me if I'm saying her name wrong. Sinha Battle Superstorms. This is the first in a, so far there's 3 books out if I'm not mistaken, and this is a STEM-based book where our main character is celebrating Diwali, and there's a hurricane coming, and she's really frustrated because Diwali is going to get ruined because of the hurricane. And she ends up bringing her cousin along, who used to have all of these adventures with their stuffed animals and cardboard boxes, and she feels like now she's too old. And so she's trying to convince her cousin, like, remember the magic, remember the fun that we used to engage in. And they go on this magical adventure where, as a reader, as a younger reader, you don't know if it's like their imagination or if it is real. And I kind of like that play of, is it real or is it not real? And what's so fun about these books is they're STEM based. And so, you know, like I said before, they're worried about the hurricane ruining Diwali. And so this is their journey to learn more about hurricanes. They fly into the hurricane and learn more about it. So there's some really, really interesting facts in there about hurricanes, how they form, how they operate, what is the eye of the hurricane, what's the eye wall, like the speed of the hurricane, what would slow a hurricane down. Have people ever done research to figure out like how to stop a hurricane? It was better than what I anticipated, and it took me a while because I had this book checked out from the library. I just never got the chance to sit down and actually pick it up, but it was good. I think if you have a reader that likes fantasy but loves a touch of science as well, this is a great introduction for them. Also, if you have a reader that's younger and wants to get into fantasy but is not ready to pick up some of the middle grade fantasy books that are currently coming out, this is a good series to start with, and I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so the next one that I ended up reading was a nonfiction book, and that was Unstoppable: My Journey from World Champion to Athlete A to 8-time NCAA National Gymnastics Champion and beyond. That is the world's longest title. This is such a long title. But this was written by Maggie Nichols. If you don't know about Maggie Nichols, she was at the center of the investigation that happened with the United States national gymnastics team and the doctor who was essentially a child predator and had been abusing these athletes for years. And so this is Maggie's opportunity to kind of tell her story about how she got interested in gymnastics, when she competed, all of the things that she did when she was competing, talking about disordered eating. So there's a content warning for that, as well as the content warning for the sexual abuse at the hands of the doctor, and how that ended up impacting her career, and how her injuries impacted her career, and how her coming forward and really addressing the abuse at the hands of the doctor, how that eventually impacted her, and what she feels is her opportunity that was taken from her to be able to compete on the Olympic team. I have a lot of thoughts about this, which I think is pretty interesting. And I was looking down because I wanted to remember the guy's name, which is Larry Nassar. I wanted to make sure I put his name out there. If you don't know anything about Larry and the horrible shit that he did to these young girls and women, I would look it up. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And Maggie, the documentary Athlete A on Netflix, is in reference to Maggie. Maggie was known as Athlete A before she came forward and said, I am Athlete A, and put a name to, you know, keeping her identity, because at first, of course, they were keeping her identity anonymous, and she did not want that to be the case anymore. She wanted to make sure that people knew like who she was as a person and how much it had impacted her. I think that this is a story that needs to be told. I have a daughter that is in gymnastics right now. I don't know if she will potentially do this like for the rest of her life. Like, this is, you know, we're just trying out a series of different things that she might end up liking, something that she may stick with, you know, just trying to get her involved in as many activities as possible. But I've heard about the horrors that gymnastics has been in the past. I've talked to a couple of other moms that have had their kids in gymnastics, and they said that the profession itself is getting better. But, you know, with having a young girl, a little girl, enter into the profession, you start thinking about different things, body image, size, and expectations of a sport and how that would impact your child. And so there were some things that I was aware of that the sport is definitely known for. but I did not know the intricacies of Maggie's story, and I am glad that she got the opportunity to tell her story. Now, I am not going to rate this. I rarely ever rate autobiographies, memoirs, simply because this is someone's opportunity to tell their story and recall their experience and share it with the world. This is not a well-written book. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there. Maggie is in her 20s and this book read like a 15-year-old wrote it. So it's not the content, and I always say that, especially with books that tackle such difficult experiences. It's not the content. It's not me shaming her experience or what she's been through or relaying her story at all, because this young woman has a hell of a story, and the fact that she's come out with such a positive attitude at the end of all of this says a lot about her, because a lot of people in her position would have broke, and it did hurt her. I'm sure it did. And she talks about how it had impacted her, but to be so positive and to kind of say, you know what, I'm done, I'm gonna retire, and to want to move forward with your life and, you know, start a new career. It's tough to back away from something that you love so much, because essentially you've been blackballed. Yeah, that's what it boils down to. She's been treated unfairly. But if I'm being fair as a reviewer, and I'm looking at this from a critical standpoint at all angles, this is not a well-written memoir. It reads very juvenile. You cannot tell that Maggie is in her mid-20s at this point writing this book. It was a struggle for, it's a short, which is wild to me because it's a short book. This book doesn't even cap at 200 pages. It was a struggle for me to get through this book because the writing was just not good. And this could have used some serious editing on the back end. And I think sometimes it's good to have that extra layer of editing. That way your story is told in the most powerful, clear, concise way. And in this, it felt convoluted. It felt choppy. It felt, I don't know. It did not feel like this was coming from an adult, if that makes sense. And this is not to say that no one should read this book or you shouldn't appreciate the story that she's telling, because she blows the cap off of the way U.S. Gymnastics, I don't know if it's the U.S. Gymnastics Association, if that's, there's a name, but I can't remember if that's the correct name. She blows the lid off of them, okay? And rightfully so, as she should. So I don't want to discredit her on that part, but if you do pick this up, go into it knowing that it is not the best written work that you will ever come across. So I'm going to leave it unrated, but if you want to know more about the legacy of the gymnastics world and how it has impacted young women, I would highly recommend checking that one out. And the last one that I'm going to talk about, I think I said 8. Maybe I counted wrong, y'all. I think it's supposed to be 7. The last one that I'm going to talk about is Yours from the Tower by Sally Nichols. This is my first Sally Nichols book. I believe that she has written other books, or maybe, I don't know. I always get confused. I always feel like I should look this stuff up before I sit down and look or start talking. But I'm pretty sure this is not Sally Nichols' debut book. This is a book written in letters, epistolatory. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did not want to say that word because like I'm finna butcher it. But it is a book told in a series of letters. And it's about 3 friends. I'm gonna look down and say their names. Tirza, Sophia, and Polly. It's 1896 when this book starts, and these 3 friends had met at school, and at this point they've all gone in their separate directions. Tirza is basically trapped with her grandmother. Her grandmother is interesting in the beginning. I can't say my thoughts about her in the beginning are the same thoughts I have about her at the end of the book, because they do change just slightly. Polly is in an orphanage teaching children, which she absolutely loves it. And then we have Sophia, who is in London for the season trying to find a rich husband. I adored the friendship between these three. It was not the most entertaining book. Granted, it takes place in 1896. There's a little bit of drama that kind of makes the stakes a little bit higher. But at the core, this is a coming of age story. Three young girls trying to find themselves, trying to fulfill the expectations of society while also trying to maintain their own sense of identity. And I really did enjoy that because they're each other's lifelines and supports while they're going through varying issues. And literally each one of them has a set of different issues. And I liked that they were able to guide each other through those issues, even when they made huge mistakes. I mean huge. Because my girl Tirza fucking up any opportunity that she could. She was gonna do it. But I love that Sophia and Polly like never judged her. They always were like, we want you to be safe. We want you to make the right decisions. We don't want you to put yourself in any position where you're going to get harmed, or something is going to go wrong, or your prospects are going to be ruined. I think Sophia was the one that Polly. Polly was the one that I think I connected with the most because her personality was just very bright, very ambitious, like such a love and passion for children, and working in an orphanage, knowing the circumstances that they come from, and just wanting to have their best interests at hand at such a young age. I was like, yes, 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 yes. She was my connection. And I didn't know if I was gonna like Sophia because I'm thinking like, oh gosh, she's like, she's not high maintenance, but she needs to have a rich husband. And I don't think I respected how much stress that put on her, being like not having money, and how big of an issue that was for women back then. And understanding that to marry a man with no prospects, no money, like you put yourself in a very, very tough position, especially if you're from a family that has no like money at all. I also liked that Sally Nichols like included perspectives from other characters to the letters that they wrote to the three girls and the communication that the three girls had with them. It created a wider cast of characters because at first I was like, dang, so the three letters are only gonna like stick in between our three girls and they're just gonna tell us about their experiences. But no, I love that Sally Nichols was able to draw in other characters because the girls were communicating with them via letter as well. It was brilliantly done. I must say, it was not what I was expecting. This is not typically what I gravitate towards for young adult historical fiction, but I enjoyed it. Now, this is being comped as Bridgerton. I don't think that this is Bridgerton vibes. I think that it gives a nice portrait of what life was like in 1896. We're on the cusp of the Edwardian era. And I think that that is something that we don't typically see in young adult historical fiction. I think I see a lot of Victorian era and post-Edwardian era. But the fact that this is on like at the end of Victorian era, on the cusp of the Edwardian era, is something that's a little different. And I think that Sally Nichols gave a, clear, concise snapshot of what life would have been like during this time period and how things were changing in terms of not just like socially, but changing in terms of like industry and what people were doing. And I thought that that was really fascinating because it's not what we typically see. But if you're looking for a good historical fiction that is coming of age, this would be a good fit. I would not comp this with Bridgerton. I've read the first book in the Bridgerton series, and I don't really feel as though they have quite a lot in common. But that is just my personal opinion. But I enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was a delightful read. Quick and easy read. I love female friendship in books. Like, it just does something to the spirit. All right, y'all. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm currently reading and what I have up on the docket. So I am currently reading 4 books. I do not have any of them. I'm not going to show you any physical books today because you know what? I am on a major backlog of shit that I need to read. And I don't want to overwhelm anybody, including myself, with the amount of things that I need to accomplish within the next few weeks. But I am currently reading Hot for Teacher. This is the Richardson Sibling Trilogy, book number 1 by Monique Fisher. Child is good. Child is so good. She literally has not been dating. The main character has not been dating at all. And her sister is like, we're gonna get you out. We're gonna have some drinks, because she's a single mom. And her brother ends up taking her son out for a trip right before school starts. And her sister's like, okay, well, while our brother has, you know, Neff and everything, we gonna go out and you gonna have a one night stand. She's nervous about it, but she makes it happen. And then her son was supposed to have a teacher for the start of 3rd grade. That teacher ended up leaving for a different opportunity. And so there's a new teacher. And guess who the teacher is? I'm gonna let y'all guess. So far, so good. I'm ready already for the second book to release. And I'm not even finished with the first one. I literally have like 3 minutes left of this book. And I was not gonna push it because I'm like, I need to get this film. I'm not gonna push it. But I hope this doesn't find you. It's so cute, y'all. I literally have a few minutes left of it. They are rivals. They hate each other. They're in constant competition in high school, our two main characters. And things start to change after all of her emails, like these hateful emails that she saved in her drive. She never sent them to people, but she would just use that as a way to kind of get her anger out. And they accidentally get sent to everyone in the school, including him. And things go left. And it is so cute. It's definitely enemies to lovers. And I'm eating it up. It's a good book. I'm not currently reading, but I haven't started that book yet. I plan to read Hummingbird Season by Stephanie V.W. Lucianovic. Butchered her last name, but I do plan on reading that one. It's a short middle grade in verse about life during the pandemic. And then I literally have a few minutes left of You're Breaking My Heart. Literally a few minutes left. So I have a couple of things that literally I'm on the cusp of finishing. Literally on the cusp of finishing. But I wasn't going to try to force myself and push and rush to finish it for the sake of this video. But yeah, that's all the things that I've read for weeks 7 and 8. Let me know in the comment box below what you've read in the past couple of weeks. Let me know your best and your worst. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I will be back with another video soon. Bye! But you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the sky.